picture yourself in a dimly lit chamber at Winterfell, where shadows dance across ancient stone walls and the wind howls outside like a living thing. An old woman sits beside the hearth, her wrinkled hands moving ceaselessly with her needlework, and when she speaks, her voice carries the weight of centuries. "Oh, my sweet summer child," she says, her milky eyes somehow seeing far more than yours ever could. "What do you know of fear?" This is how the stories begin in Westeros, passed down through generations, whispered in the darkness, sung by the hearth fires. These are the legends that define what it means to be Westerosi. The myths that echo through castle halls and wildling camps alike. The prophecies that drive kings to madness and heroes to glory. Some places in Westeros are cursed. Not metaphorically, not in the sense that bad things simply happen to occur there, but genuinely cursed, touched by forces that ensure anyone who holds them will come to ruin. The greatest and most terrible of these doomed places is Harrenhal, the monstrous castle built by Harren the Black on the shores of the God's Eye Lake. Harren the Hoar was king of the isles and the rivers, ruling both the Iron Islands and the Riverlands through conquest and cruelty. He was an Ironborn through and through, understanding only strength and domination. For 40 years he forced his subjects to labor on his great castle, the largest fortress ever built in Westeros. He cut down entire forests to provide timber. He worked thousands of men to death in the quarries and on the construction. He poured the wealth of 2 kingdoms into creating a monument to his own power. The castle that emerged was truly staggering. Harrenhal had 5 massive towers, each larger than any normal castle's keep. The Kingspire Tower stood tallest, its top lost in the clouds on misty days. The Tower of Ghosts, the Widow's Tower, the Wailing Tower, and the Tower of Dread, each had their own grim significance. The walls were so thick that 6 teams of horses could ride abreast atop them. The Great Hall could feast 1,000. The Godswood was 20 acres of ancient trees, including a massive weirwood whose face seemed to scream in eternal anguish. Harren spared no expense, showed no mercy, accepted no counsel that his ambition was too great. When lords and small folk alike warned him that he was courting disaster, that the gods would punish such hubris, he laughed. He was building the greatest castle in the world, an impregnable fortress that would stand for 10,000 years, from which his dynasty would rule the Riverlands until the end of time. On the very day that Harrenhal was completed, Aegon Targaryen landed at the mouth of the Blackwater Rush, with his sister wives and 3 dragons. Harren received word of this invasion and was unconcerned. Let the Dragon Lord come. Harrenhal's walls were thick enough to withstand any siege, high enough to keep out any army. No force in the world could breach his mighty fortress. But Aegon did not besiege Harrenhal. He flew there on Balerion the Black Dread, and his sisters accompanied him on Vhagar and Meraxes. The 3 dragons circled the great castle, and then they breathed fire. Stone does not burn, but it can melt. The heat was so intense that the stones of Harrenhal ran like candles, the great towers becoming misshapen, twisted ruins. Harren and his sons took shelter in the tallest tower, thinking themselves safe. They were roasted alive inside their stone refuge, which became their tomb and their funeral pyre. 40 years to build, 1 day to destroy. This is the curse of Harrenhal in its most literal sense, that all of Harren's ambition, all his cruelty, all his power came to nothing in a single afternoon. The gods, it seemed, had answered those who warned about his hubris. Or perhaps it was simply that dragons are the doom of men who think themselves invincible, But the curse did not end with Harren's death. Indeed, it had only begun. In the nearly 300 years since Harrenhal's construction and destruction, the castle has passed through dozens of owners, and every single one has come to a bad end. The pattern is so consistent, so undeniable, that even the skeptical maesters acknowledge something strange about Harrenhal, even if they will not use the word curse. House Coharis received Harrenhal as a reward for their service to Aegon. They lasted only 2 generations before the 3rd Lord Coharis was killed while hunting, murdered by his own squire. House Harroway came next, rising high when one of their daughters married King Maegor the Cruel. But when Maegor's wives kept producing stillborn monsters instead of healthy heirs, he blamed sorcery and had the entire House Harroway executed. Every man, woman and child. House Towers held it next, but they lasted only 3 generations before dying out. House Strong followed, and they seemed to do better for a time, producing several generations of lords. But then came the Great Fire during the reign of King Viserys I, when Lord Lionel Strong and his heir Harwin perished in flames. Many suspected this was no accident but murder. The remaining Strongs died out soon after in suspicious circumstances during the Dance of the Dragons. House Lothston held Harrenhal for several generations, but they are remembered as perhaps the darkest of all the castle's owners. Lady Danelle Lothston, called Mad Danelle, was rumoured to practice dark sorcery in the castle's depths. Stories claim she bathed in blood to preserve her youth, that she kept company with bats that would fly from Harrenhal's ruins in great clouds at dusk. Whether these tales are true or simply the usual exaggerations that grow around cursed places, House Lothston fell into disgrace and madness, their line ending in ruin and whispered horror. Housewen inherited the castle after that, and they held it longer than most, but even they could not escape Harrenhal's doom. The castle became the site of the Great Tourney, where Rhaegar Targaryen crowned Lyanna Stark as Queen of Love and Beauty, the event that many say sparked Robert's rebellion. The Wents watched their world collapse in that war. By the time the War of the Five Kings began, Harrenhal had been passed from Went to Lannister again, each holder meeting terrible fates. Janos Slynt, granted Harrenhal as a reward for his betrayal of Ned Stark, was exiled to the Wall before he could even take possession. Littlefinger received it next, and wisely never actually went there, governing through stewards while staying far away in the Vale. The castle became a den for raiders and deserters, a place of torture and horror during the war, cursed ground soaked in blood and misery. What makes Harrenhal cursed? The skeptical might say, there is no curse at all, simply a pattern of unfortunate coincidence combined with the fact that Harrenhal is too large to maintain properly, too expensive to garrison adequately, and too symbolic a prize not to attract the ambitious and doomed. After all, who receives Harrenhal? Either those already powerful, who become targets for their rivals, or those newly raised high, who lack the resources to hold such a massive fortress. Either way, disaster follows, but others see genuine supernatural malevolence at work. The castle was built through cruelty and watered with the blood of thousands who died in its construction. It was completed only to be immediately destroyed in Dragonfire, with Harren and his sons dying in agony. Perhaps their screams still echo in the stones. Perhaps the souls of all who suffered to build Harrenhal linger there, ensuring that no one will ever profit from their misery. The weirwood in Harrenhal's Godswood is said to have a face carved in eternal anguish, its mouth open in a silent scream. Some say this represents Harren himself, trapped forever in the moment of his death. Others claim it predates Harren, that the Godswood was sacred ground before the castle was built, and that Harren's sin was not just hubris, but also desecration of a holy place. Whatever the truth, Harrenhal stands as a warning about the dangers of overweening pride, about the temporary nature of all human power, about the doom that awaits those who build their glory on the suffering of others. No one wants Harrenhal anymore. It is too large, too expensive, too cursed. It sits by the gods, aye, its melted towers reaching toward the sky like the fingers of a dying giant, a monument to the folly of kings. But Harrenhal is not the only cursed place in Westeros. The ruins of Summerhall, the Targaryen Summer Palace, carry their own dark reputation. King Aegon V, called Aegon the Unlikely, was beloved as a ruler, but he became obsessed with hatching dragon eggs and returning dragons to the world. He gathered mages and sorcerers, studied ancient texts, attempted ritual after ritual. Finally, during a great celebration at Summerhall, something went terribly wrong. Fire consumed the palace. King Aegon died along with his eldest son, Prince Duncan, and Lord Commander Sir Duncan, the Tall of the Kingsguard, the legendary knight. Many others perished in the flames. The specifics of what happened have never been fully revealed, buried by the survivors, but it is whispered that Aegon's attempt to hatch dragons through blood magic and sacrifice backfired catastrophically. Now Summerhall stands in ruins, another monument to Targaryen hubris and obsession with dragons. Some say the site is haunted by those who died in the fire. Others claim that the magic Aegon unleashed still lingers there, making the ruins dangerous to approach. Whatever the truth, Summerhall serves as a warning that even good intentions, even love of family and realm, can lead to doom when combined with dangerous magic and desperate ambition. The Night Fort, which we will discuss more later, is another place where darkness seems to have soaked into the very stones. Even after it was abandoned by the Night's Watch, and its brothers moved to Deep Lake, the Night Fort retained its sinister reputation. When Stannis Baratheon claimed it as his seat, even his own men were reluctant to shelter there. The castle has seen too much evil, too many atrocities, too many dark deeds over thousands of years. Some places, it seems, remember. Then there are the ruins of old Valyria itself, the doom of Valyria being the greatest catastrophe in recorded history. The Valyrian freehold was the mightiest civilization the world had ever seen, an empire built on dragon lords and blood magic. For 5,000 years they ruled most of the known world, their dragon lords treating other nations as subjects or slaves, their sorcerers performing feats of magic that seem impossible even in legend. Then, in a single day, it all ended. The 14 Flames, the volcanic mountains at the heart of Valyria, erupted simultaneously in a cataclysm of such magnitude that it shattered the Valyrian peninsula. The land itself broke apart. Cities sank beneath the waves. Volcanoes spewed ash and fire. Earthquakes shattered what the fire and water did not destroy. The smoking sea that now exists where Valyria once stood is a hellscape of smoking ruins, demon-haunted waters, and lingering death. What caused the doom? No one knows for certain. Some say the Valyrians delved too deep in their minds beneath the 14 Flames, cracking the world and releasing forces they could not control. Others whisper of slaves who learned forbidden magic and used it to destroy their masters. Still others speak of prophecy, of warnings ignored, of hubris that finally met its inevitable end. What is certain is that the ruins of Valyria are now among the most dangerous places in the world. Ships that sail the smoking sea rarely return. Those that do bring back tales of horrors, demons in the mist, diseases that rot flesh from bones, madness that consumes the mind. Even centuries after the doom, Valyria remains a cursed wasteland, its treasures and secrets guarded by whatever dark forces now inhabit the ruins. Princess Aeria Targaryen flew to Valyria on Balerion the Black Dread and returned changed, dying slowly from some terrible affliction. Things were moving beneath her skin, writhing and burning. She died in agony, screaming, and even Balerion himself bore terrible wounds from whatever they encountered in the ruins. If the greatest dragon in the world could be injured there, what hope has any human? These cursed places serve a purpose in Westeros' collective consciousness. They are warnings made physical, lessons written in stone and ash. They remind the ambitious that no power is absolute, that hubris invites destruction, that some forces are beyond human control or understanding. They are monuments to failure and folly, standing long after the proud men who created them have turned to dust. But they also hint at something deeper and more troubling, that places can be tainted, that evil can soak into the land itself, that the barrier between the living world and whatever lies beyond is thinner in some locations than in others. Whether you believe in literal curses or simply in the psychological weight of history and tragedy, these doomed places shape how people think about the world, where they will go, and where they refuse to tread. Harrenhal remains the greatest of these cautionary monuments, visible for miles around the God's Eye, its twisted towers a permanent reminder that even the mightiest fortress offers no protection against the truly powerful, and that those who build their glory on suffering will find no peace, not in life, and perhaps not even in death. No collection of Westerosi tales would be complete without addressing the long night, the apocalyptic winter that nearly ended all human life in the world. This event, which occurred roughly 8,000 years before the main events of our story, has spawned more legends than any other period in history. The facts, such as they can be determined, are these. A winter came that lasted a generation. Darkness covered the world, and the White Walkers emerged from the far north to wage war on the living. Humanity stood on the brink of extinction, but humanity survived thanks to heroes whose deeds have passed into legend. The problem, of course, is that after 8,000 years, it becomes nearly impossible to separate truth from embellishment, to distinguish between actual events and the myths that grew up around them. What we have are stories, and those stories contain both truth and meaning, even if we cannot always verify the specific details. The last hero is perhaps the most important of these legendary figures, at least in the north. Old Nan's version of the tale begins with the long night already upon the world. The others have come, bringing cold and death with them. Corpses rise to fight for the enemy. Humanity is losing, slowly but inexorably, to an enemy that cannot be killed by normal means and that grows stronger with each fallen defender. In this darkest hour, the last hero sets out with 12 companions, seeking the children of the forest. He believes they possess the knowledge needed to defeat the others, some ancient magic that can turn the tide. The journey is harrowing beyond description. One by one, his companions die. His horse dies, even his dog dies. The others hunt him relentlessly, and whites pursue him through the frozen wasteland. Giant ice spiders as large as hounds stalk him through the snow. But the last hero perseveres. Alone on foot, armed with nothing but determination, he finally reaches the children of the forest. What happens next is less clear. Some versions of the tale say the children taught him how to make dragon glass weapons, which could kill the White Walkers. Others suggest more mystical aid, perhaps the very magic that allowed the wall to be raised. What matters is that the last hero succeeded. Through his sacrifice and courage, he helped turn the tide against the others, contributing to their ultimate defeat and the end of the long night. The story of the last hero serves multiple purposes. On the simplest level, it is a tale of perseverance against impossible odds. The last hero loses everything, everyone, and continues on anyway, because the fate of the world depends on it. This is the kind of a hero the North admires. Not flashy or glorious, but stubborn, enduring, willing to sacrifice anything for duty. But the tale also contains practical wisdom. It tells us that the others can be defeated, that they are not invincible. It reminds us that the children of the forest were allies against the darkness. It emphasizes the importance of seeking help, of not trying to face impossible challenges alone. And it warns us about what to expect if the others return. The hunting, the cold, the inexorable advance of death. Interestingly, the last hero's tale bears striking similarities to other legends from around the world. In Essos, they speak of Azor Ahai, a hero who wielded a burning sword called Lightbringer to defeat darkness. The specifics differ from the last hero story, but the core elements align. A hero, a time of darkness, a desperate quest, ultimate victory at great cost. Azor Ahai's legend is particularly important because it comes with a prophecy that the hero will be reborn to fight darkness once more. According to the Red Priest of Arolor, when the stars bleed and darkness gathers, Azor Ahai will return, wielding Lightbringer anew to save the world from its darkest hour. The story of how Azor Ahai forged Lightbringer is both beautiful and terrible. He labored for 30 days and 30 nights to create a sword worthy of fighting the darkness. On his first attempt, he worked the metal and then tempered it in water, but the blade shattered. On his second attempt, he tempered it by thrusting it into the heart of a lion, but again, the steel shattered. Finally, Azor Ahai understood what was required. With a heavy heart, he called his wife Nissa Nissa to him. She bared her breast, knowing what must come. He drove the sword through her heart, and as her soul and strength and courage all passed into the steel, the blade transformed. It glowed with heat, radiating light and warmth, capable of cutting through the cold and darkness. This was Lightbringer, the red sword of heroes, purchased at the ultimate price. The sacrifice of Nissa Nissa is one of the most haunting elements of any Westerosi tale. It speaks to the terrible choices required in the darkest times, the understanding that sometimes salvation demands the sacrifice of what we love most. Azor Ahai did not want to kill his wife. The grief of that act surely never left him. But he did what was necessary to save the world, and in some tellings, Nissa Nissa went willingly to her death, understanding the stakes. Is Azor Ahai the same person as the last hero? Are these two different names for the same individual, or different heroes who fought the same darkness in different parts of the world? The masters debate this question endlessly. Some argue that the global nature of the long night would have produced multiple heroes, each remembered differently by their own cultures. Others contend that stories drift and change as they cross cultural boundaries. So Azor Ahai and the last hero are simply different versions of the same tale. What seems clear is that whether we are speaking of one hero or many, The Long Night was defeated through tremendous sacrifice and courage. The stories, whether strictly accurate or not, preserve this essential truth. Darkness can be beaten, but the cost may be higher than we can imagine. Then there is the Night's King, a legend of an altogether different sort. This is not a tale of heroism, but of corruption, a warning about what happens when men give themselves over to darkness. According to the stories Old Nan told, the Night's King was the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, serving not long after the wall's construction. He was a warrior without fear, which Old Nan always said was his great flaw, for all men must know fear. One night, while atop the wall, the Night's King saw a woman. Her skin was pale as the moon, her eyes like blue stars, and her skin cold as ice. A sensible man would have recognized her for what she was, something inhuman and dangerous. But the Night's King was fearless, and he chased her and caught her and loved her. When he gave his seed to her, he gave his soul as well. The Night's King brought this corpse queen, as she came to be called, back to the Night Fort and declared himself her king. Using dark sorcery, he bound his brothers to his will, making them his slaves. For 13 years, he ruled the Night Fort as his own personal kingdom, committing atrocities that are still spoken of in whispers. He made sacrifices to the others, the very enemy the Night's Watch was sworn to fight. Finally, the Night's King's reign of terror came to an end when Brandon the Breaker, the king in the north, joined forces with Joramun, the king beyond the wall. These ancient enemies united against a common threat, and together they brought down the Night's King and freed the Night's Watch from his spell. After his fall, when it was discovered what he had done, all records of him were destroyed. His very name was forbidden and forgotten, wiped from history as if he had never existed. The legend of the Night's King varies depending on who tells it. Some say he was a Stark of Winterfell, brother to Brandon the Breaker. Others claim he was a Bolton, or an Umber, or a Magna of Skagos. Old Nan, naturally, insisted he was a Stark, and perhaps his name was Brandon, and maybe he had even slept in Bran's own room in Winterfell. She would pinch Bran's nose when she said this, making the ancient evil suddenly intimate and terrifying. Like the other legends of the Long Night, the Night's King story serves multiple purposes. It is a warning about the danger of consorting with the enemy, about letting desire override duty. It reminds the Night's Watch of their sacred mission and what happens when that mission is betrayed. It also demonstrates that even the most terrible evil can be defeated when enemies unite against a common threat, a lesson that would prove relevant thousands of years later. One particularly interesting aspect of these Long Night legends is how they have been dismissed and forgotten by much of the realm. In the north, people still remember. They still tell the stories. They still watch for the other's return. But in the south, where winter is less harsh and the wall seems impossibly distant, these tales have been reduced to scary stories for children, myths with no bearing on reality. This forgetting is dangerous. The masters, with their commitment to rationalism, have played a role in this. They teach that the others were never real, that the long night was simply an unusually long winter, that the legends have exaggerated everything. Some Meisters even argue that the wall was not built to keep out magical ice demons, but simply to mark the boundary between civilization and wilderness. But those who live near the wall, who have seen what walks in the darkness, know better. The Night's Watch has maintained its vigil for 8,000 years, keeping the realm safe from threats that most people no longer believe exist. And when the others finally did return, the realm was unprepared because it had forgotten its own history, dismissed its own legends as mere superstition. This is perhaps the most important lesson of the Long Night Tales. We forget the past at our peril. The stories are not just entertainment or cultural artifacts. They are warnings preserved across millennia, telling us that darkness has come before and will come again, that we must remain vigilant, that the price of safety is eternal watchfulness. The heroes of the Long Night, whether we call them the Last Hero, Azor Ahai, Brandon the Breaker, or other names lost to time, fought to give humanity another chance. They paid terrible prices for that victory. The least we can do is remember their sacrifice and heed their warning. If the Long Night represents Westeros' darkest hour, the Age of Heroes is its golden age, a time when legendary figures walk the earth and perform deeds that echo through the ages. This period, which lasted from the ending of the Long Night to the coming of the Andals roughly 6,000 years later, produced more legends than any other era in Westerosi history. Chief among these heroes is Brandon the Builder, also known as Bran the Builder, the founder of House Stark and builder of wonders. According to legend, Brandon the Builder lived during the Age of Heroes and accomplished feats of engineering and architecture that seem impossible even by modern standards. He is credited with building the Wall, founding Winterfell, and contributing to the construction of Storm's End and even the High Tower in Old Town, though scholars debate whether one man could possibly have accomplished all of this. The Wall stands as Brandon's most impressive achievement, assuming he actually built it. This immense structure of ice stretches for 300 miles along the northern border of the Seven Kingdoms, standing 700 feet tall and protected by ancient magic. According to Maester Childer's ballad, Brandon raised the wall with the help of giants, who used their immense strength to move the massive ice blocks into place. The children of the forest supposedly helped as well, weaving protective spells into the ice to keep the others at bay. Could one man really have directed such a project? The Maesters are skeptical. They suggest that Brandon the Builder might actually represent several different Brandon Starks across multiple generations, their accomplishments merged into one legendary figure through the passage of time. Or perhaps there was one particularly impressive Brandon, and later Starks attributed all sorts of ancient constructions to him to enhance House Stark's prestige. But the legends insist it was one man, and they provide tantalizing details. Some say Brandon was descended from Brandon of the Bloody Blade, one of the many sons of Garth Greenhand, the legendary progenitor of House Gardener and other houses of the Reach. As a boy, Brandon supposedly helped Durin Godsgrief build Storm's End, the massive fortress in the Stormlands that has withstood every storm for thousands of years. The construction of Storm's End is itself a legend worth exploring. Durin, a warrior of great renown, fell in love with Elenay, the daughter of the sea god and the goddess of the wind. When they wed, her divine parents were so enraged that they destroyed Durin's castle with storms on his wedding night, killing all the guests. Durin vowed to build a castle that could withstand even divine fury, and he set about constructing fortress after fortress, each destroyed by the god's wrath. Finally, according to some versions, a young Brandon came to help. Using his knowledge of engineering, and perhaps aided by the children of the forest or ancient magic, he designed a castle that could withstand any storm. Storm's End has stood for thousands of years since, its massive walls and powerful wards protecting it from hurricane winds and towering waves. During Robert's Rebellion, It withstood a siege by the Tyrells for an entire year without falling. Whether Brandon the Builder was one man or many, whether he actually built all the structures attributed to him, or became a convenient attribution for anything old and impressive, his legend serves an important function. He represents the Stark identity: strength, endurance, building things meant to last. The Starks don't seek glory or gold. They build walls against the darkness. They establish strongholds that will shelter their descendants for millennia. They do what is necessary, what is hard, what will endure. Moving south, we encounter another legendary founder, Lann the Clever, the progenitor of House Lannister. Unlike Brandon the Builder, whose legends emphasize strength and endurance, Lann's tales focus on wit, cunning, and trickery. This reflects the different values of the Westerlands compared to the North. The most famous story about Lann tells how he won Casterly Rock, the great fortress that has been the seat of House Lannister for thousands of years. In those ancient days, Casterly Rock was home to a different family, House Casterly, and the rock itself was infested with lions. Lann, who was either a handsome young man or a child, depending on which version you hear, used trickery to drive the lions from their dens in the rock. Some versions say he snuck into the depths of Casterly Rock at night and began making terrifying noises, convincing the lions that the caverns were haunted. Others claim he scared the lions out by releasing mice and rats into their dens. Still others suggest he filled the depths with snakes. Whatever his method, Lann supposedly drove the lions from Casterly Rock, and the Casterlys, now defenseless without their guardian beasts, surrendered the rock to him without a fight. Another legend claims Lann stole gold from the sun itself to pay for his schemes, which is clearly impossible, but speaks to the legendary cleverness attributed to him. Some Meisters suggest that Lann the Clever might have been a trickster figure from various tales, and real historical Lannisters later claimed descent from him to legitimize their rule. Others argue he was a real historical figure whose deeds have been exaggerated through endless retellings. Regardless of the truth, Lann the Clever's legend defines House Lannister's self-image. They are clever, they are cunning, and they win through their wits rather than mere strength. A Lannister always pays his debts, but a Lannister also always finds an angle, a weakness to exploit, a clever solution to impossible problems. This self-conception has shaped Lannister behavior for millennia. The Reach has its own founding legend in Garth Greenhand, sometimes called Garth the Gardener. Garth is portrayed as a semi-divine figure, one of the first men, but with the powers of fertility and growth. He could make any field bloom, could make barren women fertile, could bring prosperity wherever he walked. According to the most extravagant legends, flowers sprang up in his footsteps. Garth is said to have had countless children, both legitimate and bastard, by numerous women. Many noble houses of the Reach claim descent from him through one line or another. House Gardener, which ruled the Reach as kings until the Targaryens arrived, claimed direct descent. After the Targaryens destroyed House Gardener, the Tyrells, who were previously only stewards, claimed legitimacy partly through their service to the Gardeners and thus their connection to Garth's legacy. The legend of Garth Greenhand reflects the Reach's identity as the most fertile part of Westeros, the breadbasket that feeds much of the continent. Just as Brandon the Builder represents the North's harsh endurance, and Lann the Clever represents the Westerland's cunning, Garth Greenhand represents the Reach's abundance and fertility. These regional founding legends help explain how different parts of Westeros developed distinct cultures and values. the Iron Islands have their own legendary founder in the Grey King, who supposedly ruled for 1,000 years and took a mermaid to wife. He carved his throne from the hard grey stone of the islands and fought sea dragons and krakens. The Grey King's Hall supposedly was located beneath the sea, and he taught the Ironborn to make ships and to reave and to fear no man. Like other founding legends, this one reflects Ironborn values: strength, independence, mastery of the sea, and the rejection of mainland laws and customs. What is fascinating about all these Age of Heroes legends is how they have shaped the identities of different regions and houses. A boy growing up in the north hears about Brandon the Builder and learns to value endurance and duty. A girl in the Westerlands hears about Lan the Clever and learns that wit can triumph over strength. These stories are not just entertainment. They are instruction manuals for how to be a proper member of your culture. But these legends also reveal something troubling. They are almost exclusively about men. Where are the legendary women of the Age of Heroes? Some exist, like Elene, but they are usually defined by their relationship to male heroes rather than their own achievements. This reflects the patriarchal nature of Westerosi society, but it also means that half the population's potential contributions to legend have been erased or forgotten. There are exceptions. The Grey King's mermaid wife plays an important role in Ironborn legend. Garth Greenhand's daughters founded various houses and are remembered in their own right. But by and large, the Age of Heroes as preserved in legend is an age of great men, with women serving as wives, mothers, and prizes rather than heroes in their own right. The Age of Heroes also produced legendary items and places that resonate through Westeros's history. Dragon glass, also called obsidian, was supposedly discovered or first used during this period, when someone learned it could kill the others. The weirwood trees, already ancient, became sacred sites where the old gods watched the world. Great castles rose, many of which still stand today, testament to the skill of their builders or the power of the magic that reinforced them. As with the Long Night legends, modern Westeros has largely forgotten or dismissed these tales. Southern Meisters argue that the Age of Heroes is mostly myth, that these figures could not possibly have accomplished the deeds attributed to them, that magic was never as powerful as the stories claim. But the massive structures that date from this period suggest otherwise. The Wall exists, Winterfell stands, Storm's End has never fallen. These physical remnants prove that something extraordinary happened during the Age of Heroes, even if the specific details have been lost or embellished. The Age of Heroes represents a time when magic was stronger, when the barriers between the possible and impossible were thinner. Whether we interpret this literally or metaphorically, it speaks to a fundamental truth about Westeros. The world was once different, more dangerous perhaps, but also more wondrous, and we live now in the shadow of greater times. The heroes of that age set patterns that their descendants still follow, established houses that still rule, built structures that still shelter us. And if the prophecies are to be believed, if Azor Ahai is to be reborn, and heroes must rise again to face the returning darkness, then perhaps the Age of Heroes is not truly past. Perhaps it is simply sleeping, waiting to awaken when the world needs it most. Of all the castles along the Wall, none has spawned more dark legends than the Night Fort. This massive fortress, the first and largest of the Night's Watch castles, was abandoned 200 years before the main events of our story, when Queen Alysanne Targaryen convinced the Watch to build a smaller, more maintainable castle called Deep Lake. But even abandoned, even fallen into ruin, the Night Fort cast a long shadow across northern legend. The Night Fort figured prominently in Old Nan's scariest stories, and with good reason. This is where the Night's King reigned before his name was wiped from memory. This is where countless dark deeds occurred over thousands of years, each leaving its mark on the stones and the stories. When Bran Stark finally visits the ruined castle, he finds it. Exactly as frightening as Old Nan's tale suggested. A maze of broken towers and rat-infested halls, trees growing through buildings, a place where the past seems very much alive. The Rat Cook stands as perhaps the most famous Night Fort legend, a tale that has resonated through the centuries because it speaks to one of Westeros's most sacred traditions, guest right. The story goes that the Rat Cook was a simple cook at the Night Fort who served an Andal king, identified by some as King Tywell II of the Rock, and by others as King Oswell I of the Vale. This king did something to offend the cook, the specifics varying by version. In revenge, the cook decided to serve the king a special pie. He killed the king's son, an actual prince of the realm, and chopped him into pieces. Then he baked the prince into a large pie, adding onions, carrots, mushrooms, lots of pepper and salt, a rasher of bacon, and dark red Dornish wine to give it flavour. The king, unaware of what he was eating, praised the taste of the pie. He loved it so much he asked for a second slice. He was eating his own son, made a cannibal by the cook's revenge, and he did not even know it. When the gods discovered this atrocity, they were not angry about the murder itself. Old Nan was very clear on this point. A man has a right to vengeance. The gods were not even particularly concerned about making the king a cannibal, horrific as that was. What enraged them was that the cook had slain a guest beneath his roof. Guest right is sacred in Westeros, one of the oldest and most important laws. Once you have welcomed someone into your home and offered them food and drink, they are under your protection. To harm them is to commit one of the most heinous crimes imaginable. As punishment, the gods transformed the cook into a massive white rat, cursed to eat his own young for eternity. He can never satisfy his hunger, and the children he produces become his food, a perfect ironic punishment for his crime. The rat still supposedly roams the Night Fort, its eternal hunger a reminder of what happens when sacred laws are violated. The story of the Rat Cook takes on special significance later in our tale when Lord Walder Frey orchestrates the Red Wedding, slaughtering Robb Stark, his mother Catelyn, and thousands of their men despite having offered them guest right. At Ramsay Bolton's wedding feast, Lord Wyman Manderley has the singer Abel perform a song about the Rat Cook while serving 3 large pies. The implication is clear. Wyman has baked 3 missing Freys into those pies, just as the Rat Cook baked the prince. Guest right has been violated, and Wyman is serving justice in the most fitting way he can imagine. Another famous Night Fort tale concerns brave young Dany Flint, though brave might not be the right word for what was really a tragedy born of desperation. Dany was a girl who wanted to serve in the Night's Watch, even though the Watch accepts no women, so she disguised herself as a boy, perhaps cutting her hair and binding her chest, and joined up. For a time, the deception held, but eventually, someone discovered her secret. What happened next is the darkest part of the tale. Dany was raped and murdered by her supposed brothers, the very men who should have protected her. Her body was found at the Night Fort, another victim of the darkness that seems to cling to that place. Danny Flint's story is a warning about the dangers women face in a world dominated by men, about what happens when institutions exclude half of humanity, about the terrible price of trying to step outside your prescribed role in society. But it is also a tale of courage. Danny knew the risks and took them anyway, because she wanted to serve, wanted to do something meaningful with her life. The fact that she failed, that she died horribly, does not diminish her bravery. The legend of the 79 Sentinels tells of desertion and terrible justice. According to this tale, 79 brothers of the Night's Watch deserted from the Night Fort. At some point in its long history, they sought refuge with Lord Ryswell, father of one of the deserters, hoping he would protect them. But Lord Ryswell understood that desertion from the Night's Watch cannot be tolerated. He captured all 79 men and sent them back to the Night Fort. The Watch's justice was harsh but symbolic. Rather than simply execute the deserters, they buried them alive in the wall itself. The men were entombed in ice, frozen forever, unable to abandon their posts ever again. Some say you can still see their faces in the ice if you look closely, eternally standing watch, as they should have done in life. This gruesome legend serves as a powerful deterrent against desertion. The fate of the 79 Sentinels is worse than simple death. It is eternal imprisonment, eternal cold, eternal service. Better to serve out your life willingly than to desert and face such a fate. Mad Axe represents another type of Night Fort horror, the brother who turns on his brothers. According to the legend, Mad Axe was a ranger of the Night's Watch who went insane, perhaps from the isolation, perhaps from seeing things in the darkness that broke his mind. He walked the yards and climbed the towers of the Night Fort, butchering his brothers in the dark with his axe, killing men he had sworn oaths alongside. The story does not tell us how Mad Axe was finally stopped, whether he was killed or subdued, or simply disappeared into the darkness one night. What matters is the warning. Isolation and darkness can break even the strongest men, turning brothers into murderers. The Night's Watch must be vigilant not only against external threats, but against the madness that can consume them from within. Then there is blind Simeon Star Eyes, a figure who appears in several tales. According to legend, Simeon was a knight who lost his sight, possibly after seeing hellhounds fighting at the Night Fort. Despite his blindness, he did not retire from fighting. Instead, he had sapphires placed in his empty eye sockets and wielded a staff with blades at both ends, which he could spin with such skill that he could fight two men at once. Bran Stark particularly latched onto this story after his fall left him crippled. If blind Simeon could become a knight despite his disability, perhaps Bran could still achieve great things despite his paralyzed legs. The story of Simeon Star Eyes thus serves as inspiration, a reminder that physical limitations do not have to define us, that courage and skill can compensate for lost abilities. Other dark tales cling to the Night Fort like cobwebs. King Sherrit supposedly called down a curse on the Andals from this place, though the details of that curse have been lost. Apprentice boys faced the thing that came in the night, a mysterious creature that haunted the Night Fort. Some boys died, some went mad, some were chained alongside the thing itself, suggesting it was eventually captured but could not be killed. The thing that came in the night is particularly chilling because we never learn exactly what it was. A creature, a spirit, something else entirely. The ambiguity makes it more frightening, a reminder that the Night Fort has seen horrors beyond our understanding. that darkness takes many forms, and that some mysteries are never solved. Arson Isaacs, a wildling, was walled up alive in his own tunnel beneath the wall. Legend claims you can still hear the sound of his axe chopping at the ice, trying to dig his way through. Whether this is true or simply the sound of ice settling and cracking, it has become part of Nightfort lore, another ghost haunting the ruins. All these tales share common elements. They are cautionary. They involve betrayal or violation of sacred laws. They feature terrible punishments, and they are deeply tied to a specific place. The Nightfort becomes more than just a ruined castle. It becomes a repository of collective memory, a place where the past is never truly past, where dark deeds have left permanent marks. When the Nightfort was finally abandoned, many in the Watch were likely relieved. This place had seen too much darkness, harbored too many painful memories. Building a fresh castle at Deep Lake must have felt like a chance to start clean, to leave the ghosts and legends behind. But you cannot truly escape the past. The stories remain, and when Stannis Baratheon demands the Nightfort as payment for his aid to the Night's Watch, claiming it for his seat, it represents a return to those dark times. The castle may be in ruins, but the legends it spawned continue to shape behavior and belief throughout the North. The wall divides more than just land. It divides cultures, creating a stark distinction between the kneelers of the Seven Kingdoms and the free folk who bow to no king. But despite this political and cultural division, both sides of the wall share many legends, often told from different perspectives. The wildlings have their own heroes and stories, some of which overlap with southern tales, others unique to their harsh life beyond the wall. Perhaps no wildling legend better demonstrates this overlap than the tale of Bael the Bard, a story that is remembered very differently depending on which side of the wall you stand on. To the free folk, Bael is a hero, a clever and brave king beyond the wall, who humiliated the proud Starks. To southerners who even remember the tale, he is either a myth or an embarrassing footnote that the Starks preferred not to record. According to Ygritte, who tells Jon Snow this story, Bael lived long ago, though exactly when is unclear. The chronology of the tale is confused, mentioning the King's Road, which was built during King Jaehaerys I's reign, but also describing events that seem much older. This temporal confusion is typical of legends that have been told and retold for generations, accumulating anachronisms along the way. The story goes that Lord Brandon Stark, who ruled Winterfell in those days, called Bael a coward. This was a grave insult, and Bael decided he needed to prove his courage and teach Brandon a lesson. So Bael climbed the wall, an incredible feat in itself, and travelled south along the King's Road to Winterfell. He entered the castle disguised as a singer named Sigeric of Skargos. Sigeric means deceiver in the old tongue, a name dripping with irony that apparently no one at Winterfell caught. Bael sang for Lord Stark until midnight, his skill with music so impressive that Brandon asked what reward he desired. Bael, with the cunning that characterized him, asked only for the most beautiful flower blooming in Winterfell's gardens. Since winter roses were just coming into bloom, Brandon presented Bael with a blue winter rose and thought nothing more of it. The next morning, Brandon's only child, his maiden daughter, had vanished from her bed. In her place lay the blue winter rose Bael had requested. Bael had not wanted a flower at all. He had wanted the fairest flower in Winterfell, Brandon's daughter herself. and he had taken her right from under her father's nose. Brandon sent the Night's Watch searching beyond the wall, but they never found Bale or the girl. Nearly a year passed, and Brandon fell ill. His line was about to end with no heir. Then one day, he heard a baby crying. Following the sound to his daughter's room, he found her there with an infant son in her arms. Bale had never left Winterfell at all. He had been hiding with Brandon's daughter in the crypts beneath the castle, living literally under the Lord's feet for almost a year. The bastard child became the new Lord Stark, continuing the Stark line through Bale's blood. 30 years later, Bale was king beyond the wall, leading the wildlings south. He had to fight his own son at the frozen ford. Bale could not bring himself to kill his own blood, so he let his son strike him down. The young Lord Stark brought his father's head back to Winterfell as a trophy. When his mother saw Bale's severed head, she was overcome with grief and threw herself from the top of a tower. The son, now haunted by having killed his father and driven his mother to suicide, was eventually slain by the Boltons, who flayed him and wore his skin. This tale serves multiple purposes for the Wildlings. It demonstrates that Wildlings are just as clever as Southerners, just as brave, just as capable of great deeds. It shows that the supposedly impregnable Winterfell can be infiltrated, that the proud Starks are not invulnerable, and it proves that Wildling blood flows in the veins of House Stark itself, that the division between free folk and kneelers is not as absolute as Southerners like to believe. Jon Snow, hearing this story, is certain it is a lie. The old chronicles at Winterfell make no mention of Bale. The timeline does not work properly. Too many elements seem contradictory. But Ygritte insists it is true, that the wildlings remember what the Starks chose to forget. And perhaps she is right. Perhaps the Starks deliberately excluded this embarrassing tale from their official histories, preferring to let it be forgotten, rather than admit that a wildling raider cuckolded a lord of Winterfell and fathered a future lord. The legend of Bile also resonates through current events. When Mance Rayder infiltrates Winterfell during Robert's visit, he is doing exactly what Bale did, proving it can be done. Later, when Mance returns to Winterfell disguised as the singer Abel, an anagram of Bale, he is deliberately invoking this legend, claiming that mantle for himself. The past and present interweave, with modern characters stepping into legendary roles. Another crucial wildling legend concerns Jorah Mormont, an ancient king beyond the wall who joined with Brandon the Breaker to defeat the Night's King. This demonstrates that wildlings and Northmen were not always enemies, that they once fought together against common threats. Jorah Mormont is particularly famous for possessing a great horn, the Horn of Winter, which legend claims could wake giants from the earth and bring down the wall itself. The Horn of Winter has never been conclusively found, though Mance Rayder claims to have discovered it and threatens to blow it if the Night's Watch interferes with his people trying to pass south of the wall. Whether Mance actually found the true Horn of Winter or simply used the legend as a bluff remains unclear, but the legend itself is powerful. The idea that the wall, that seemingly eternal barrier, could be destroyed by a single blast from an ancient horn. The Wildlings tell many stories about the creatures that live beyond the wall. They speak of giants, which we know are real, though dying out. They tell of the children of the forest, whom they call the Singers, acknowledging that the children still exist in the far north, even after disappearing from the south. And they speak of the others, the White Walkers that Southerners have forgotten. To the wildlings, the others are not myth. They are the ancient enemy, the reason their ancestors built funeral pyres and burned their dead. The free folk know that corpses left intact can rise as whites, servants of the others. This knowledge, dismissed as superstition by Southerners, is actually practical wisdom earned through bitter experience. The wildlings also have their own version of the last hero story, though they may not call him by that name. They remember a time when the world grew cold and dark, when the others came, when humanity nearly died. They remember that the free folk fought alongside the Night's Watch in those days, that survival required unity against the darkness. This historical memory informs their resentment of the Wall. They see it as a betrayal. After fighting together to save the world, the Southerners built a barrier to keep the wildlings out, treating former allies as enemies. One particularly haunting wildling tale speaks of the thing that came in the night, a creature that stalked the lands beyond the Wall. This may be the same creature mentioned in Nightfort legends, or it may be something else entirely. The wildlings who tell this story do so in hushed voices, suggesting that while the specific creature may be gone, the fear it engendered remains. The free folk also preserve stories about skin changers and greenseers, abilities that Southerners often dismiss as fantasy. But these powers are real, particularly among those with First Men blood. The wildlings know about wargs who can slip into the minds of animals, about greenseers who can see through the eyes of weirwood trees. These abilities are rare but acknowledged, with skin changers holding positions of respect and sometimes fear in wildling society. In many ways, wildling legends are more practical than Southern ones. They focus less on distant heroes from the Age of Heroes and more on immediate survival. How to recognize a warg, what to do with a corpse to ensure it does not rise, which places to avoid because they are cursed or haunted. These are not stories told for entertainment around safe hearth fires, but vital knowledge passed down to keep people alive in a harsh and dangerous world. Yet the wildlings also have their own sense of romance and glory. They sing of great raiders like Baal, of fierce warriors, of beautiful women who could hunt and fight as well as any man. They celebrate freedom above all else, the right to live without bowing to lords or kings. Their legends reinforce these values, teaching each new generation what it means to be free folk. The divide between wildling and Southerner is ultimately artificial, a product of political circumstance rather than fundamental difference. The legends on both sides of the Wall reflect this. The same heroes appear in different guises. The same enemies threaten all humanity. The same magic flows through the blood of both free folk and kneelers. The Wall may divide the land, but the stories reveal common heritage, common threats, common humanity. When the White Walkers finally return, when the ancient enemy emerges from legend into reality, these old stories prove their worth. The wildlings know what the others are because they never stop believing, never dismiss the tales as mere superstition. And it is this knowledge, preserved through generations of storytelling, that gives humanity a chance to survive the new long night. While tales of the past preserve wisdom and warning, prophecies attempt to illuminate the future. In Westeros, prophecy occupies a strange middle ground between respected tradition and dangerous delusion. Some prophecies prove accurate, shaping events across generations. Others lead believers down dark paths toward ruin. And some remain ambiguous, their meaning debated by scholars and priests until events either confirm or deny them. The prophecy of the prince that was promised stands as perhaps the most important of these forward-looking legends. According to the Red Priests of Rahalor, This prophecy originated in ancient Ashai over 5,000 years ago, though its exact source remains unclear. The prophecy speaks of a hero who will be reborn to fight darkness, much as Azor Ahai did during the Long Night. The specific details of this prophecy are crucial but also confusing, as they have been translated and retranslated across languages and cultures. The hero will be born amid salt and smoke. A bleeding star will herald their coming. They will wake dragons from stone. They will pull a burning sword called Lightbringer from flames and use it to defeat the darkness threatening the world. Meister Aemon, spending his final days contemplating this prophecy, made a crucial discovery. In High Valyrian, the language in which most versions of the prophecy were written, the word for prince is gender neutral. It could mean prince or princess. Generations of scholars had assumed the promised savior would be male because translators used masculine forms in the common tongue. But the prophecy could just as easily speak of a woman. This realization transformed Aemon's understanding. He had believed for years that his grandnephew Rhaegar was the prince that was promised. Rhaegar himself believed it as a youth, though he later came to think his son Aegon fulfilled the prophecy. But when Aemon learned that Daenerys Targaryen had survived and hatched 3 dragons, he understood his error. Daenerys was born on Dragonstone, a volcanic island that could certainly be described as a place of smoke and salt. She had awakened dragons from stone eggs. The bleeding star, the red comet, appeared in the sky when her dragons hatched. If anyone fit the prophecy, it was her. But prophecies are rarely simple. Others have argued that Jon Snow better fits the description. He was born amidst the salt of his mother Lyanna's tears and the smoke of the war raging across Westeros. He died and was reborn, resurrected by Melisandre's magic. He has connections to dragons through his Targaryen blood. Different interpretations emphasize different elements of the prophecy, leading to different conclusions about its fulfillment. Melisandre, the Red Priestess, initially believed Stannis Baratheon was the promised prince. She saw visions in her flames, signs and portents that seemed to point to Stannis. She convinced him to pull a sword from flames, creating a false Lightbringer that glowed but did not burn. When Stannis died, Melisandre admitted her error, but maintained that someone must be the promised prince. She shifted her focus to Jon Snow, seeing in him the hero the world needs. The danger of prophecy is demonstrated through Stannis' story. Convinced he was destined to save the world, he sacrificed everything to that belief. He burned his daughter Shireen alive, thinking it was necessary to fulfill prophecy. He marched his army to destruction in the northern snows. He became so focused on his prophecy destiny that he lost sight of basic morality and tactical sense. The prophecy, or rather his belief in it, destroyed him. This is why Maesters view prophecy with such skepticism. They have seen too many people ruin themselves chasing visions and portents. They know that prophecies are often ambiguous, open to multiple interpretations, dangerous when taken as instruction rather than possibility. Archmasters generally dismiss prophecy as superstition, though some acknowledge that occasionally predictions do come true, perhaps through self-fulfilling behavior rather than genuine foreknowledge. Another famous prophecy comes from Maggie the Frog, a woman with the gift of foresight who lived in the Westerlands during Cersei Lannister's youth. When Cersei and her companions visited Maggie demanding to know their futures, the old woman reluctantly told them prophecies that would haunt Cersei for the rest of her life. Maggie predicted that Cersei would marry a king, but not the prince she desired. She would become queen, but would be cast down by a younger, more beautiful woman. She would have 3 children, golden-haired and crowned, while her husband would have 16. All her children would die before her, their golden shrouds consuming her. And finally, when her tears had drowned her, the Valonqar, the little brother, would wrap his hands around her throat and choke the life from her. Every element of this prophecy that could be verified has come true. Cersei married King Robert, not Prince, Rhaegar as she had hoped. She became queen, but was eventually dethroned. She had 3 children by Jaime, all golden-haired, all who became king or queen. Robert had bastards throughout the realm, possibly more than 16, and Cersei's children have all died, just as Maggie predicted. The prophecy terrified Cersei because it seemed to strip away her agency. No matter what she did, these events would unfold. She became paranoid about the younger, more beautiful woman who would cast her down, seeing potential threats in Sansa Stark, Margaery Tyrell, Daenerys Targaryen, and others. This paranoia drove many of Cersei's worst decisions, as she tried to prevent the prophecy from coming true, even though her very attempts to thwart it probably helped bring it about. The Valonqar portion is particularly chilling. Cersei assumed it meant her younger brother Tyrion would kill her, and her hatred of him intensified because of this belief. But little brother could mean several things. It could be Tyrion. It could be her twin Jaime, born moments after her, technically making him the younger sibling. It could even be someone else's younger brother. The ambiguity is torturous, leaving Cersei constantly watching for threats from multiple directions. The ghost of High Heart, another figure with prophetic abilities, has provided visions that proved accurate. She predicted the Red Wedding in cryptic terms, speaking of a maid at a wedding feast with purple serpents in her hair, slaying a great beast with purple face. This referred to Sansa Stark and the poisoning of Joffrey. The ghost's prophecies come in dreams and riddles, requiring interpretation, but they have often proven true. Beyond these specific prophecies, Westeros is full of more general portents and omens. Red comets, appearing in the sky, are said to herald significant changes. Dragons hatching, which hasn't happened in over a century, signals the return of magic to the world. Dreams, particularly among those with Targaryen blood, can carry visions of truth or warning. Daenerys herself has experienced prophetic visions, particularly during her visit to the House of the Undying in Korth. She saw the Red Wedding before it happened. She saw a vision of snow falling in the throne room of the Red Keep, which might mean the others will reach King's Landing, or might simply symbolize Jon Snow's ultimate role. She saw Rhaegar with his infant son, speaking about the prince that was promised, and the Song of Ice and Fire. These visions raise profound questions. If the future can be seen, is it fixed? Can prophecy be prevented? Or does attempting to prevent it simply ensure it comes to pass? Are prophecies descriptions of inevitable futures? Or are they warnings about possible futures that might still be changed? The masters would say that prophecies are either coincidence or self-fulfilling. People hear a prophecy and unconsciously act to make it come true, or they interpret random events to fit prophetic language. But in a world where magic demonstrably exists, where dragons live and dead men walk, dismissing all prophecy as superstition seems foolish. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between absolute belief and complete skepticism. Prophecies might offer glimpses of possible futures without determining exact outcomes. They might provide warnings about dangers to come without dictating precisely how those dangers will manifest. They might illuminate paths without forcing anyone to walk them. The key difference between wise use of prophecy and dangerous obsession seems to be flexibility. Ammon changed his mind when new evidence appeared. Melisandre admitted error and looked for new interpretations. But Stannis remained rigid, certain he knew what prophecy demanded, and it destroyed him. Those who treat prophecy as one tool among many, as suggestion rather than command, seem to navigate it more successfully than those who let it dominate their every decision. As the story of Westeros unfolds, and ancient prophecies seem to be coming true all around them, characters must decide how to respond to these portents. Do they believe? Do they act? Do they try to fulfill prophecy or prevent it? These questions drive much of the conflict and drama as people struggle with the tension between destiny and free will, between what might be written and what they choose to do. In a world where most people cannot read, where books are rare and expensive, where knowledge must be preserved and transmitted somehow, singers and songs serve a vital function. They are historians, entertainers, and moral instructors all at once. A good song can preserve events more accurately than any Meister's chronicle, because it will be sung over and over, memorized and passed down, carried to places that books will never reach. The singers of Westeros occupy an interesting social position. They are welcome in both castle and tavern, among lords and common folk. A skilled singer can earn good coin performing at feasts and festivals, but they are also often viewed with slight suspicion, seen as frivolous or even dangerous, because songs can preserve uncomfortable truths or spread ideas that those in power would prefer to suppress. Some songs are purely for entertainment, light-hearted or romantic, designed to make people smile or sigh. The Bear and the Maiden Fair is a ribald favourite in taverns throughout the realm. The Rains of Castamere is a grim reminder of what happens to those who rebel against the Lannisters. Jenny's Song is a melancholy piece about lost love. These songs reflect Westerosi culture, telling us what people value, what they fear, what they dream about. But other songs serve a more important historical function. They preserve events that might otherwise be forgotten, particularly events that those in power might prefer people not remember. The singers are not controlled by any central authority. They travel freely, composing songs about whatever strikes them as worthy of song, performing for whoever will pay them, or simply for the joy of sharing music. This independence makes singers potentially dangerous. When Joffrey has Ned Stark executed, singers quickly compose songs about the event, many of them portraying Joffrey negatively. The Crown tries to suppress these songs, even having some singers beaten or imprisoned. But you cannot truly silence song. It spreads from tavern to tavern, carried by common folk who might not remember exact dates or troop movements, but will remember a good tune and clever lyrics. The most famous singers in Westeros achieve a kind of immortality through their work. Their songs outlive them by centuries, performed over and over long after anyone remembers who composed them. The singers who created The Rains of Castamere or The Dornishman's Wife are forgotten, but their songs live on. Some songs preserve history with remarkable accuracy. The Dance of the Dragons tells of the Targaryen civil war with enough detail that maesters use it as a historical source, cross-referencing it against written records. Other songs drift from truth, embellishing events, combining different incidents into one narrative, adding dramatic elements that make for better entertainment even if they sacrifice accuracy. This process of drift is how legends are born. An event happens. A singer makes a song about it. The song is performed again and again, each singer perhaps changing a detail here or there to improve the rhythm or rhyme. Over generations, the song transforms, and with it, memory of the event itself changes. What started as history becomes legend, and legend eventually becomes myth. Consider the Azor Ahai tale. Was there really a hero who forged a magic sword by stabbing his wife? Or did something else happen? Something that got transformed through countless retellings into the story we have now? We cannot know for certain, but we can see the pattern of how stories change over time, how they are shaped by cultural values and narrative preferences. Singers also serve as messengers, carrying news from place to place along with their songs. A singer traveling from King's Landing to Winterfell brings information about events in the capital, court gossip, political developments. This information might be more current than what Maester's ravens can carry, and it certainly reaches more people, since the singer will perform in every tavern and castle along the road. The power of song to shape opinion should not be underestimated. When the common folk sing songs mocking Joffrey or celebrating Robb Stark, they are making a political statement. When they sing The Rains of Castamere, they are acknowledging Lannister power and the fate of those who oppose it. Songs create shared cultural knowledge, common touchstones that bind communities together. Some characters in our story are themselves singers or appreciate the singer's art. Mance Rayder was known for his singing even before he became king beyond the wall. Rhaegar Targaryen played the harp beautifully, and his song for Lyanna Stark at Harrenhal's tournament brought tears to her eyes. The love of music seems to cut across class and culture, uniting high and low, free folk and kneelers, in appreciation of beauty. But there is also the question of truth versus beauty in song. Should a singer prioritize historical accuracy or making a good song? When these goals conflict, which should win? Most singers choose beauty, understanding that an entertaining song will be remembered and performed, while a dull but accurate recitation will be forgotten. This pragmatic choice serves the primary function of song, preservation through repetition, even if it sometimes sacrifices perfect fidelity to fact. The tradition of singers also reveals something about Westeros' relationship with art and culture. Despite being a violent, often brutal society, Westeros values music and poetry. Great lords employ singers, pay them well, request specific songs. Common folk save their copper to hear a good performance. Even worldlings living in the harsh lands beyond the wall make music and sing songs around their fires. Art is not seen as mere luxury, but as essential to human life. This appreciation for song and story creates space for criticism and alternative perspectives. A singer can say things in song that would be dangerous to say directly. Satire, mockery, and uncomfortable truths can be woven into lyrics and delivered with a smile, making them both more palatable and harder to suppress. The singer's craft thus serves not just to preserve the past, but to comment on the present and imagine the future. As the main events of our story unfold, singers are already composing songs about them. The War of the Five Kings, the return of dragons, the coming of the White Walkers, all of these will be sung about for generations. The participants in these events are already becoming legends, their deeds being transformed into songs that will outlive them. History is being written in real time, not in Maester's chronicles, but in verses and choruses that will echo through taverns for centuries to come. The process by which history becomes legend does not require centuries. We can watch it happen in real time during the events of our story, as remarkable individuals and extraordinary events are transformed into tales even before the facts are fully known. This reveals something important about how legends work. They are not simply old stories, but active, living interpretations of events that serve present needs. Consider how stories about Daenerys Targaryen spread across Essos. She hatched 3 dragon eggs, creatures that had been extinct for over a century. This alone would be worthy of legend. But the circumstances surrounding it, walking into Khal Drogo's funeral pyre, emerging unburnt with 3 baby dragons clinging to her, are so extraordinary that even accurate recounting sounds like myth. As word of this miracle spread, the story grew and changed. Some versions emphasized Daenerys' Targaryen blood, suggesting that only one of the old Dragon Lord families could perform such a feat. Others focused on the funeral pyre aspect, interpreting it as a religious ritual, a sacrifice that purchased the dragon's rebirth. Still others saw prophecy fulfilled, the bleeding star and the birth amid salt and smoke. In Volantis, the Red Priest Bonero preaches that Daenerys is Azor Ahai, returned, born to save the world from darkness. He interprets her every action through this prophetic lens, seeing signs and portents where others might see political maneuvering or simple survival. His sermons spread this interpretation to thousands, creating a legend of Daenerys as prophesied savior, even while she is still conquering slaver cities across Slaver's Bay. But others tell different stories about the same events. Some say the dragons are small and weak, that stories of their size and power have been exaggerated. Some claim Daenerys is a tyrant, that her conquest of the slaver cities is motivated by greed rather than justice. Some suggest she is mad, carrying the curse of Targaryen madness that afflicted her father. Each interpretation reflects the teller's perspective and agenda, shaping Daenerys into different legendary archetypes: savior, conqueror, liberator, or mad queen. Similarly, Jon Snow's story is already passing into legend even as he lives it. The bastard who became Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. The man who united wildlings and Night's Watch brothers against a common enemy. The leader who was murdered by his own men and then resurrected. Depending on who tells the story, Jon is either a traitor who broke every tradition of the Watch, or a visionary who understood that old enmities must be set aside to survive the real threat. The Red Wedding provides another example of how events immediately transform into legend. The slaughter of Robb Stark, his mother Catelyn, and thousands of their men under the sacred protection of guest right was so shocking, so outside normal codes of conduct, that it could not be processed as mere military strategy. It had to become a story, a cautionary tale, a myth. Almost immediately, songs began circulating about the Red Wedding, each emphasizing different aspects. Some focused on the betrayal, on Walder Frey's violation of guest right. Others emphasized the Stark nobility in death, Catelyn's mad grief, Robb's final moments. The legend of the Red Wedding serves multiple functions. It demonstrates the cost of trusting your enemies, the importance of guest right, the brutality of the war, and the tragic fall of the young wolf. But different factions tell the Red Wedding story differently. Lannister supporters emphasize that Robb was a rebel who got what he deserved. Stark loyalists speak of it as murder and betrayal. The common folk, distant from the politics, turn it into a ghost story, claiming that Catelyn Stark rose from the dead as Lady Stoneheart, a vengeful spirit hunting those who wronged her family. This last version, which happens to be true in the books, shows how quickly supernatural elements attach themselves to remarkable events. The legend of Robert's Rebellion similarly demonstrates how recent events become mythologized. This war happened less than 20 years before the main story begins, Yet already it is being transformed into legend. Robert becomes a great hero, wielding his hammer to overthrow a mad tyrant. Rhaegar becomes either a villain who kidnapped Lyanna Stark, or a tragic figure caught between duty and love. Lyanna herself becomes a damsel, either rescued too late or dying for love. Each version of this story serves an agenda. Robert's version emphasizes his heroism and the justice of his rebellion. The Targaryens' few remaining supporters tell it as a tragedy, the overthrow of the rightful dynasty by ambitious usurpers. Those who know the fuller truth, like Ned Stark, keep silent, allowing the legends to flourish while protecting secrets that could endanger the innocent. This process of selective truth-telling is crucial to understanding how legends work. They are not necessarily lies, but they are never complete truths either. Details are emphasized or omitted based on what lesson the story is meant to teach or what impression the teller wishes to create. Over time, these selective tellings become the accepted version, and anyone who tries to correct them is dismissed as a revisionist or a troublemaker. The common folk play an important role in creating these modern legends. They take the basic facts, often learned through singers' songs or travelers' tales, and add their own interpretations, their own emphases. A soldier who fought in a battle tells his version to his children, emphasizing the parts he saw personally, perhaps embellishing his own role. A merchant who fled King's Landing during the city's fall recounts what he witnessed, colored by his own fear and confusion. These individual stories combine and merge, creating composite narratives that are not quite what anyone experienced, but capture something true about the collective experience. The legend that emerges from this process is often more emotionally true than factually accurate, conveying the fear, the chaos, the significance of events in ways that simple chronologies cannot. Modern technology and communication would prevent much of this legendary transformation, but Westeros has no instant communication, no photographs, no video recordings. Events are known only through eyewitness accounts, letters, and eventual songs and stories. This creates space for legend to flourish, for different versions to coexist, for truth to be multiple and contested. The characters themselves sometimes recognize that they are becoming legends even as they live. Daenerys knows that stories are told about her across 2 continents. Jon Snow hears his own name in songs sung at castle, at Black. Tyrion Lannister is aware that his actions at the Battle of the Blackwater are being transformed into legend, though not always in ways that flatter him. This self-awareness creates an interesting dynamic. How do you live when you know you are becoming a legend? Do you try to shape the narrative, to influence how you will be remembered? Do you embrace the legend and try to live up to it? Or do you reject it, insisting on your own humanity against the myth-making? Some characters lean into their legends. Daenerys accepts titles like Mother of Dragons and Breaker of Chains, understanding that these legendary epithets give her power and authority. Robert embraced the legend of Robert the Warrior, even as it became increasingly distant from the reality of Robert the King. Others, like Jon Snow, seem uncomfortable with legendary status, wanting to be judged as themselves, rather than as some mythic figure. The creation of living legends also affects how people interact with these legendary figures. Soldiers serve Daenerys not just because she is a queen, but because they believe she is prophesied to save the world. This belief makes them braver, more willing to sacrifice. But it also creates impossible expectations. How can any human live up to being a prophesied savior? What happens when the legend and the reality diverge? This tension between legend and reality runs through all the stories we have explored. The ancient heroes of the Age of Heroes probably did exist and accomplish remarkable things, but the legends about them have grown far beyond historical accuracy. The modern heroes of our story are real people with flaws and doubts, but legends are already growing around them, transforming them into archetypes and symbols. Westeros needs its legends. In a brutal world where life is often nasty, brutish, and short, people need heroes to believe in, stories to inspire them, narratives that make sense of chaos. The legends serve psychological and social functions that transcend their historical accuracy. They give meaning, provide hope, establish values, create shared identity. But legends can also be dangerous. They can inspire foolish heroism or justify terrible cruelty. They can create expectations that real people cannot fulfill. They can be weaponized by those who understand how to manipulate narratives. The challenge is to appreciate the value of legends while remaining aware of their limitations, to let them inspire without letting them blind. We have journeyed through centuries of stories tonight, from the Age of Heroes to the present day, from the Wall to the Summer Sea, from ancient prophecies to newly forged legends. We have explored how Westeros preserves its past through oral tradition and written word, how singers and storytellers keep memory alive even as masters record what they can verify. We have examined tales of heroes and villains, of triumph and tragedy, of prophecy fulfilled and prophecy perverted. What have we learned from this exploration of Westeros's tales and traditions? Perhaps most importantly, we have learned that stories matter. They are not mere entertainment or decoration. They are how civilizations remember themselves, how they pass down wisdom, how they make sense of an often senseless world. The tales that old Nan told young Bran by the fireside were not just scary stories, but essential education, preparing him for challenges he could not yet imagine. We have learned that the line between history and legend is always blurred, that truth and meaning are not always the same thing, that sometimes a story can be false in its details yet true in its essence. The specific facts about Brandon the Builder may be lost to time, but the legend of Brandon teaches real lessons about duty, about building things meant to last, about standing against the darkness. Whether there was one Brandon or many, whether he built all the structures attributed to him or only some, the story serves its purpose. We have learned that prophecy is a double-edged sword, potentially illuminating but also dangerous, capable of guiding heroes but also driving them to madness. The prince that was promised prophecy might point toward a real savior, or it might simply describe patterns that people fulfill through their interpretation of it. Certainty about prophecy, as Stannis learned, can be more destructive than healthy skepticism. We have learned that stories change as they are told and retold, that each teller adds something and takes something away, that what survives is often what resonates, rather than what is strictly accurate. The tale of Bael the Bard means different things to wildlings than to Starks, and both meanings are valid even if they contradict each other. The multiplicity of interpretation is not a bug, but a feature, allowing stories to speak to different audiences and serve different purposes. We have learned that new legends are always being born, that the process of myth-making does not require centuries, but can happen in months or years. The characters of our story are becoming legends even as they live, their deeds transformed into songs before they are cold in their graves. This suggests that the ancient heroes were probably not so different from modern ones. flawed humans whose stories were shaped by those who came after. Most importantly, we have learned why Westeros clings to its tales and traditions even in an age that increasingly dismisses them. The stories preserve knowledge that would otherwise be lost. They encode wisdom in memorable form. They connect people to their past and give them models for facing the future. When the White Walkers returned, and the realm had to fight darkness once more, it was the old stories that provided guidance, the ancient warnings that proved true. Old Nan, sitting by the fire in Winterfell, telling her stories to children who would rather be elsewhere, was doing sacred work. She was preserving memory, passing down warnings, keeping the flame of knowledge alive in the darkness. When she told young Bran about the last hero or the Night's King or the Rat Cook, she was preparing him for a world where such knowledge might mean the difference between survival and extinction. And that, perhaps, is the final lesson of Westeros's tales and traditions. We forget them at our peril. The maesters who dismissed the White Walkers as myth, the lords who laughed at prophecy, the kings who thought the old stories were irrelevant. All of them were wrong, dangerously wrong. The old stories endure because they contain truth, hard-won wisdom purchased through terrible experience and suffering. So the next time you hear an old tale, a bit of folklore, a prophecy or legend that seems too fantastic to be true, remember Westeros. Remember that dragons did return, that White Walkers did emerge from legend into reality, that prophecies did come to pass even when everyone had stopped believing in them. Remember old Nan, sitting by the fire, insisting that her stories mattered even when no one wanted to listen. Old stories are like old friends, she said. You have to visit them from time to time. And she was right. The stories wait for us, patient and enduring, holding wisdom that each generation must rediscover for themselves. They are our connection to the past and our guide to the future, our warning and our hope. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the tales and traditions of Westeros. If you enjoyed this exploration of the stories that shape this world, I would be immensely grateful if you would like this video and subscribe to the Midnight Lawkeeper. There are so many more corners of this world to explore, so many more stories to uncover, and I would be honored to have you along for the journey. Until we meet again, may your fires burn bright, may your stories never be forgotten, and may you always remember that winter is coming, but so too are the stories that will help us survive it. Good night, dear friends, and sleep well.